A former analyst for the Bank of England just warned that alien disclosure could throw global financial systems into crisis. But we're already in financial crisis, aliens or no aliens. And if there was some official disclosure tomorrow, people would just go back to work and worry about groceries. But what if there's free energy technology? The analyst worries that would be a disaster. For whom? ExxonMobil? Probably. You and me? No. The materialist scarcity mindset is transactional. But there's a more efficient way to structure our communities, and it's about building for mutual benefit. Not easy, but definitely not impossible. Anyway, we're still pretty sure we're headed for calamity, thanks to a broad cultural inability to accept reality, which turns out not to care very much about what we think it should be.
Vision Radio.
Welcome to Gods, Ghosts, and UFOs, the biggest podcast in the universe, where we talk about all the things they said weren't real. My name is Jordan, and I'm here today with Tom. Unfortunately, Mallory is not with us today, which is something that we should have known much earlier than we did, because she told us, but we forgot. So here we are, and here's the plane.
Yes, that's Mal, actually.
Yeah, that's actually probably Mallory.
That was airborne.
Mal I should probably
is
close my windows.
An in-demand entertainer.
She's sorry not to be here, but we did decide to pick a topic that she wouldn't want to be here for. So that's at least so that's
true?
Something.
Oh, is that
true? Well, out of all three of the topics that we put in our title, her least favorite is UFOs.
Alien morphology.
Exactly. So today we're going to be talking about, UFOs, specifically the former policy expert of the Bank of England, Helen McCaw, who says that the world's financial systems could be thrown into crisis by the revelation of the existence of aliens. This is an article from Newsweek, and I just had to talk about it, Tom. I just had to.
Okay.
The thing is, I'm going to try to restrain myself so that I don't just make fun of it, but mostly all I want to do is make fun of it.
I have no intention of restraining myself.
The truth is that everybody approaches every topic from their own frame of reference, from their own expertise, from their own ideologies and experiences. And I don't feel judgmental of individuals or people, but I do feel judgmental of framings and ideologies. And I think it is funny that something would make a big enough splash as to break on Newsweek and then, plenty of other places talking about this because some official financier, some person who is very much or has been or was at some point very much a part of the global financial system comes out and says, hey, if it turns out that somebody confirms aliens are real, that could be a financial crisis. That could be, and I just think this is just a wonderful sort of comical absurdity. And the two main things that I wanted to point out were, one, it's just sort of one more absurd angle of disclosure, right? Where you have one more person kind of going on record and saying, here's some really boring thing that might happen as a result of this really incredible revelation. And also it's sort of, I think, a misunderstanding of the general population. Like I've been on record as saying that I think that if there's some big revelation that we're not alone and that there's aliens here, that the next day people would not care. People would just be going about, unless there is significant impact in terms of material change in the world as a result of, that would accompany the revelation, because the revelation itself is not going to materially change very many people's lives. It is just going to be one more thing that people have to argue about in the vast sphere of our argumentative, informational landscape. So I'm not convinced that people would react in a dramatic way for the most part. I think people are just going to go back to work and go back to worrying about whether or not they can afford groceries next week. So that's my official position. I don't think that a revelation of aliens being real would throw the world into financial conflict. My second take is that we're already in financial crisis. There are 100 other things that are sending us so close to the edge of absolute global economic collapse. And locally, in our own country, we are in such dire straits on so many different fronts that it's almost absurd. It's like no one can even comprehend it. Like we're banished to the corners, experts talking about their own domains, and every single one of them saying, we're in uncharted territory. Things aren't looking good. And that's everywhere. Aliens has nothing to do with it. And I do believe that we're not alone. And I do believe that eventually there's going to be some revelations, but it doesn't matter. To me, it's so hilariously disconnected. But because, and I guess the last thing is that I had this sort of errant thought that perhaps, like, why now? Why would Helen McCaw come out and talk about this now? What motivated her? And I can't help but wonder if she's just, a podcast listener. She's just been hearing a few episodes on the topic and has some reactions that are natural to her station and experience. Anyway, what do you think, Tom?
Okay. Let me start at the beginning. Okay. I'm going to the Times of London right now. Piece that was published on January 16th called Bank of England Must Plan for Financial Crisis Sparked by Aliens. A former analyst at the central bank has urged Governor Andrew Bailey to put contingencies in place to prevent collapse if alien life is confirmed. This woman, Helen McCaw, served as a senior analyst in financial security at the UK Central Bank, preparing for events that could impact the economy. She wrote the bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, urging him to organize contingencies for the possibility that the White House may one day confirm that we are not alone in the universe. Now, I want to find some quotes from this letter, which is why I went to the Times, because she wrote the Times. The United States government appears to be partway through a multi-year process to declassify and disclose information on the existence of a technologically advanced, non-human intelligence responsible for unidentified anomalous phenomena, she wrote. If UAP proves to be of a non-human origin, we may have to acknowledge the existence of a power or intelligence greater than any government and with potentially unknown intentions. It is entirely possible that government leadership and their central banks have not been properly briefed on the topic. UAP disclosure is likely to induce ontological shock and provoke psychological responses with material consequences. She added, there might be extreme price volatility in financial markets due to catastrophizing or euphoria, and a collapse in confidence if market participants feel uncertain on how to price assets using any of the familiar methods. And then she goes on to catastrophize and say, there might be a run on gold, or gold might be completely devalued. I don't know. And to me, the whole thing, and see if I can find this, because
it's just so silly. It's so silly. There's already a run on gold. I'm just saying.
Sure. She had little interest in the subject of UFOs until she stumbled upon a peer-reviewed NASA paper entitled Unidentified Flying Objects in Classical Antiquity, so she's my kind of gal, written by the astronomer and planetary scientist Dr. Richard Stothers in 2021. Quote, I just thought it was a Hollywood thing and that it was only backwards people that saw them, she said. I didn't know that governments were studying them. Okay. Cut to, what's her name? Thelma from Scooby-Doo? Velma. Saying jinkies, or that one shot where everyone on Scooby-Doo is looking at a piece of paper and then they jump cut to them looking at the camera because they just had some disturbing revelation. That's literally it. This woman, none of this stuff was on her financial analyst radar until she reads a paper. And I think that she also came across this article that came out, again, recently. I'm getting it from The Star, published on January 4th, in which it turns out that the British defense chiefs were hoping to rebuild Britain's military using alien technology. This is true. In the 1990s, an internal memo dated March 4th, 1997, stated, logic would indicate that if significant numbers are reporting seeing strange objects in the sky, then there may be a basis in fact. It could be argued that UAPs pose a potential threat to the defense of the realm since we have no idea what they are! Exclamation point. And a supplementary issue is the possibility of technology acquisition. So British defense chiefs wanted to get UAP tech to build their technology, which is the story of American involvement in the UFO scene since at least the late 1940s.
At least.
And all we've heard
late
about
1930s.
is crash retrieval, what is it, retro engineering of tech, highly, highly secret, classified, disinformation. And so this woman comes across this thing and goes like, this might mean market volatility. But it presupposes a couple of things beyond shady governments want to get some kind of edge by acquiring NHI tech. It presupposes that the Trump administration can disclose jack shit at all. That there's this rumor going around that somehow Trump is going to get up and make the big D disclosure about the reality of non-human intelligence. And frankly, I don't buy it unless it's to further distract from the Epstein files. Period.
I mean, yeah. If people want the official GGU position on whether or not Trump is going to be the disclosure president, it will all come down to whether or not it serves his ego. Like, right. That's just, yeah. That is the pure and simple thing. I think almost everyone, I think even Trump supporters would agree with that statement. Unless people truly believe that the man is, somehow more of an altruist than it seems, which I think there's a very small number of people who believe that it's just going to come down to whether or not it's advantageous for him, his personal image of whatever. So, you can't bank on that because there's so many different factors that like who knows?
Who would believe
right?
for a moment that he has access to that information?
Whether or not he's even read into the thing that he could disclose is another thing that I don't think anybody knows outside of circles that I'm not part of. I don't belong to those signal chats. So anyway, I have this thought about how the conversation is managed, and I mean managed, both intentionally and unintentionally across the general media landscape. And one of the things that occurs to me is that our elites, and in that I mean both thought leadership and financial elites and political elites, all the people who are sort of in control, they are the minority. They're the people who have power, either soft power or hard power, either financial power or intellectual power, academic power, whatever. That world of the upper percentile elites has been dominated, absolutely dominated by modern materialist scientism, by the materialist worldview, the hard science worldview, for a long time, to the point that these people they're allergic to any idea that is attached to the UAP phenomena. For them, the existence of any kind of supernatural or non-human intelligence or whatever would be a huge ontological shock. The thing that's funny to me is that the story we always hear is that, if people find out, if people, capital P, everybody, if people find out, there's going to be this huge ontological shock and they won't be able to handle it. And that has been one of the things that has supposedly convinced lots of people who maybe had the opportunity to maybe make some decisions about some kind of disclosure of something or other to say, actually, maybe let's not, because I don't want to cause that kind of an upset in the vox populi, right? But the reality is that it's them. They were the ones that couldn't handle the ontological shock. Like regular people, the majority, the 99%, if you will, the non-elites, just the working stiffs and the churchgoers and everybody, all the people, all the general population, non-empowered people who are just doing their jobs. Most of them either already kind of believe it or don't care. And so if you told them, they'd be like, yeah, or so. That's going to be the main reaction of the non-elites. But then you have the elites telling everybody, oh, well, you guys can't handle it. You guys can't. It's projection. That's what's going on here. It's just projection. They can't handle it. So they think that the rest of the population can't handle it. The sad irony to me is that the projection becomes, what do you call it? Self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Yeah.
Like if you think that there's going to be a global financial crisis, you personally will cause the global financial crisis because of your fear of it.
Okay, number one, her phrasing is really interesting. She has predicate, if the UAP proves to be of non-human origin, we may have to acknowledge the existence of a power or intelligence greater than any government.
I had to
Most
stop
people
myself from
walking around
laughing.
today
Yes.
already feel that there is the existence of a power or intelligence greater than any
The
government.
vast majority of people believe that.
It's not NHI unless you're talking about angels and Jesus or Buddha.
Yeah.
So already we're having an issue here. My
Yeah.
take on it is more of a like a socialist take. Although I agree with everything you're saying. A long time ago, someone said the stock market is not an indicator of how well the economy is doing, and I didn't understand what they were saying for years, because the stock market has to do with capital and the investment in capital. Most people can't afford to own stocks and make those kind of investments. They go paycheck to paycheck, right? So,
Especially
however
now,
well
which
the
is,
stock
yeah.
market is doing has nothing to do with the typical person, but it has to do with international capital, and capitalism is based on exploitation. Now, so what you get this bait and switch. Oh, stock market is the reliable metric of how well the economy is doing. No, it isn't. By the same token, if there is big D disclosure about the existence of NHI, everyone will freak out and systems will collapse. No, as you pointed out, most people are more or less like, that's probably the case, that we're not alone, whatever. I got bills to pay, whatever, I got
Yeah.
to go to my kid's game.
Yeah.
The systems that will be threatened, and she even talks about this. She goes, what if it's shown functionally that there's free energy? What'll happen? Oh no. What if it's shown that gold doesn't have the kind of value we've assigned it, which, by the way, is just based on a few people agreeing what the value of that metal that we pull out of the ground is. What if we can get all kinds of gold from other planets now? It'll devalue it, So the system of international capital would be undermined and possibly destroyed. Now, if we stipulate as a premise, NHI exists, then we go back, almost 100 years and go, what's been happening with the United States government, with United States intelligence agencies, with NASA, with black ops programs, with all kinds of like secret stuff, dissemination, the Pentagon budget, all that stuff. What's been happening according to, what do you want to call it? Information and belief, as the lawyers say, folklore. What's been happening is that a very, very small cabal of people know about this and are exploiting it to their own benefit. And the reason that they don't want the rest of us to know about it is, in fact, for the same reason why halfway through lockdown, people were like, why did I ever need to go to an office? Why do I even have a job? Like, why is that even important? A lot of the sort of like structure in which most people exist will prove to have no foundation, right? In terms of why you do what you do, or why you are made to do what you do in order to prove your worth as an individual, earn your living, and things like this. So that would have to do with governmental structure, centralized governments. It would have to do with centralized financial institutions. All of that stuff could be completely undermined. So yeah, she read a piece about UAPs and was like, holy crap, this might have ramifications. But what she's representing is an almost Byzantine structure, which frankly was already built on shifting sands. And then if the thing is revealed to be true, the thing that many of us suspect is true, to a greater or lesser degree, even if you go from the premise of there's a greater power, there's an intelligence that's greater than governments. Well, that's a pretty low bar. So even starting there, whatever, but like, yes, it's going to be a big shakeup. Now, she's going like, well, people might have a hard time buying groceries. And like you said, honey, we're there.
Yeah.
We're already having a hard time buying groceries.
I don't love doomerism. I don't love nihilism. I do worry, and I had this conversation with a friend the other day, that I sense a vast and deep immaturity in our modern culture in many ways. And
Yeah.
I think that I think there's a lot of loveliness. I think there's so much loveliness that you can't even, it's incomprehensible. It's vast. And I have not really ever met a person that I think is unlovable. I think that we are all pretty amazing and wonderful if you
This
really
is a
get to
hell
know
of a
us.
preamble. You're really like winding up
But
for a hell of a pitch right now.
oh, it's
Just
it's
give it to
I'm
me.
trying to plant the flag and where the light is because it's going to get real dark. I've tested a lot of different framings for this. This isn't just one more iteration in terms of how to collapse our problem into like a brief statement or idea. And that is that we culturally are very, very uncomfortable to the point of absolutely refusing to acknowledge the need for trade-offs. So I want this and I want this, and I refuse to believe that these two things are mutually incompatible. And I think this drives all of our politics. It drives everything. Everybody they want what they want, and they refuse to accept that sometimes you can't have everything that you want. Like, you have to choose, and choices are hard. Choices sometimes mean that you have to accept one thing you really, really don't want because it means that you get the thing that you want even more. We could come up with infinite examples of this, but I think that ultimately this is where almost all partisan violence and frustration and all the toxic everything, all the things that we sort of like are looking out and like, man, we're treating each other so bad. And also all the exploitation that's going on, where people are refusing to acknowledge that if you make choices to exploit these kinds of resources or these kinds of people or these kinds of systems, well, then what you're going to wind up with is a hollowed out system that can't survive and will eventually collapse or whatever. All these things that like we're too immature. Like, we haven't reached that point. I think one of the big markers of maturity is the ability to see, understand, and accept trade-offs and then make decisions accordingly. So, what happens to a culture that has stopped accepting trade-offs? What I'm talking about is basically what happens to a culture that refuses to accept reality. And reality continues forward anyway. And I think what ends up happening is you just get crushed by it. Reality will win. It will always win. And so if we're at this sort of cultural place where the vast majority of us are not quite able to comprehend or accept reality, there's a sort of rude awakening waiting for us. And I think that we see this, all of the crises that we see coming, it seems like no one's willing to step up and meet those crises. Like, we don't have the leadership. We don't have the know-how. We don't have, it's like, where are the solutions? You know, people talk about the problems all day long. You can find, infinite articles and thought pieces and think it's very, very smart people who are like, there's a problem. But like, I think that there's a real dearth of solutions. And so all of this is to say, I don't think it's going to be UAP disclosure that causes these crises. I think we're already there. We're heading for it. And I don't see a way out, I guess is what I'm saying. So all of the loveliness that I believe in and that I'm trying very hard to contribute to, I think ultimately we're in for very hard times, because that's sometimes the only way you can grow up is by hitting reality really, really hard to wake you up to its existence. And then you have to navigate it. But like, what that looks like, how that feels, I'm not the one to say. To tie this all back to this topic, one of my hopes is that in the sort of rolling forward of reality, part of the reality that we have been unable to understand or accept, partly because it's been hidden from us and obscured by disinformation, is the reality that we're not alone. And so that can be one of the great sort of salvific features of reality that if we will accept, helps us, right? If we're willing to accept it, make it through this sort of like painful leap in maturity that it will take to get from where we are now, which is the sort of like soft denial of so much, to acceptance and embrace of reality as it really is. And then how do you move forward from there? I'm probably going to cut all that out, and I have the right to do that because I edit this show. But
I don't know that you should.
But anyway, it's where my head's been out lately, because it feels very imminent.
What is it? It's doing a lot of work for you there.
I mean, the time when it's hard to buy groceries for everyone, either because they're not in the store or because the money doesn't work the way the money is supposed to work. Those kinds of simple realities that we take for granted, or those simple luxuries, I would say, that we take for granted, where like there will be food. Me and everyone I know and our parents and our parents' parents, by and large, grew up in a world where food was not that hard to get. And I don't know what it would feel like to be in a world where that's not true anymore. And that's one thing, right? But like right now, the majority of people can get a job. How long is that going to be true? You know, right now, the majority of people can have a place to live and to get out from underneath the elements. How long is that going to be true? I don't know that everything is going to go so terribly. I don't think I hope that that's not true, but I don't know. When I say it, I mean like the threshold at which everyone kind of starts to realize, oh, all the nice things that we've sort of taken for granted and thought that that's just the way the world works. That's not naturally how the world works. Like this stuff doesn't show up by magic. It
like
shows up by massive,
the...
successful, coordinated systems. And if those systems stop being successful, then those magical opportunities or those magical luxuries will go away. And so that's what I mean by it.
The wheel must always turn, and there must always be renewal. And there always has been, and there always will be. But what that also means that there are periods of suffering and lack.
Yeah.
When we did that thing in Los Angeles, when SpectraVision launched, we've talked about it a couple of times where we did a thing with some sister podcasts, and one of the guests on that stage was Danny Sheehan, who does was it Full Disclosure podcast with Danny Sheehan, and he was talking about the question that Daniel Noah put out was, you know, if you get to the pearly gates and you can ask the question like, what if you can have the question answered, what are they, or are they real, or whatever it was, what would it be? And he launched into this whole thing about the five different morphologies and Mal had a bit of a crise, but
yeah,
I started talking about the Chandogya Upanishad. I started talking about how we're all functionally iterations of Brahman, and that like where you start from with respect to our relationship with NHI or anything else is that we all come from the undifferentiated source. It doesn't mean that we're more powerful or as powerful necessarily, although I also remember what Mark said about there's nothing they can do that we can't learn how to do. And then when I wrote about the Upanishad for the Substack, I learned about the honey doctrine, which describes mutual interdependence as a process of reciprocal nourishment, like a cosmic metabolism. Everything is honey to everything else. So you have several ways of apprehending this in terms of like disclosure. What if we are told somehow that NHIs are real? One, this idea of the top-down hierarchical disclosure of people who know, bringing down the tablets from on high to tell the people who don't know, that is an ancient and obsolete system. It's not even how humans really like collect information or how information is available to humans. We've just made it siloed in that way for the maintenance and preservation of acquisition and maintenance of power. That's it. Hierarchical systems are all about power. Horizontal systems are all about community. On an individual level, some people will definitely suffer from ontological shock. It will be very, very difficult for them to allow that into their worldview. That's just the way it is. Strict materialists will have a bit of a meltdown unless if you start talking about multidimensional entities, it's going to be rough. I think of the Tower card, the major arcana card in the tarot deck. The Tower is functionally the thing that will collapse. It'll feel very sudden and catastrophic, but it could never stand. That structure could never stand. It was a castle made of sand. And so once that is gone, as upsetting as it may be, it does provide you a new opportunity to build something more solid on a firmer foundation. And then the third thing is that this woman is terrified that these financial institutions might collapse or be undermined. And I'm like, why is that a problem?
It's a problem if it
problem if people starve to death.
Well, yeah, that's the thing that I worry. The thing that worries me the most, and this is partly a function of living in a very urban area. It's very easy for urbanites, for people who live in thickly populated areas, to see how very bad things could go, how quickly if there wasn't food in the grocery store.
And but that's not an argument to maintain exploitative systems, including
it's not.
Governments that no longer function in terms of being a collectivized force for good or to promote the general welfare. If that's not happening and you have something else, then simply the existence of a government is not actually your best option.
Well, I don't. This is where it gets so far above my pay grade so quickly, because like again, I'm one of those people you can very easily see the problems, but like, where are the solutions, you know? Because I want to see like, like systems of exploitation are horrible. I would love to see them
Right.
come down. But if nothing replaces them, that is, because is this the worst of all possible worlds? I mean, in some ways maybe, but no also, because like maybe the worst of all possible worlds is chaos and survival of the fittest. Like, I don't really
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
live in a, you know,
Well, like a
I don't
Mad
want to live
Max,
in like a
like a
post-apocalyptic hellscape where
sure.
it's like just like
Yeah.
warlords who are like just determining who gets access to the
You know
freaking
that.
canned food
Okay.
stores that somebody, you know, put
When you were a
together in a
kid,
freaking bunker. Like, I don't want to live in that world. So
did they make you read Lord of the Flies when you were a kid?
yeah,
Okay, Lord of the Flies. It's awful, right?
yeah,
Just
it's terrible.
terrible.
It's terrible, but it's
Everybody's
also, and I think I might know where you're going with this, because there was a story like 10 or 15 years ago where like that happened to like a bunch
yes,
of kids, where like
yes.
they got lost on an island and they were there for like a long time, and they all like just learned to work together, and they were like happy as clams or whatever.
Yep,
And I
yep.
think so much of this is a function of where you're from, because here's the other thing I know that like people are not naturally altruistic. I have 3 kids. Like, they're great. They're wonderful. They're beautiful spirits. They're also driven by appetite, and like they're little chaos egos. Like, they just, all they want is what they want. They barely even recognize that there's anyone else in the world. They're like, half the time the conversations we have with our 7-year-old is like, how would you feel if someone did this to you? You know, we're like trying so hard to teach them that. So I think that like pro-social behavior is not something that just emerges naturally. It's not something
But
that you
it's
just
not altruism. It's not. There is no more efficient interpersonal or social model than the mutual benefit society. It's not a thing where like I'm giving this to you at my own expense at all. It's a
yeah.
thing where like you do this really well, I do this really well, and we like benefit each other. Like
Yeah.
I get the benefits of the work of what it is you're able to do well, and you get mine. Now, is that easy? And no, not always. But like, it's not the case where it's like this idea of the materialist idea of if you benefit, if you increase, I must decrease. If you get something, it
Zero-sum
must be taken
transactionalism.
from me. Not
Yeah.
the case at all, right?
Yeah.
And this is what this person is saying about NHI technology. What if there's free energy?
Yeah.
What if there's free
Wouldn't that
energy?
be a disaster?
Wouldn't that be a disaster? Yes, it would, ExxonMobil. It would be a disaster. Would that be a disaster for you and me? No.
It might not be.
Here's the other thing. I think of this
Yeah.
very florid translation of the Dhammapada, where Buddha says, therefore, Ananda, be ye lamps unto yourselves and cling to no external refuge. Cling to the truth as a refuge. If it's the case that non-human intelligence, vastly superior to our own, technologically superior to our own capabilities, exists, and most of us don't know about it, or very, very few of us do know about it, and whether or not that truth is revealed is contingent upon certain societal institutions surviving, we're already headed for disaster. Because, like you said, the reality of the situation is what it is. Suffering comes from the degree to which one is able to accept or the reality or the fluidity with which they are able to adapt to reality, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not, it doesn't care. It simply is.
Yeah.
And if that is the reality, then we already exist in it. Our ignorance of it is not going to reduce its realness.
Yeah. Our suffering will exactly correlate with our resistance to it.
Precisely
whatever it is.
Precisely
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Precisely so.
Well, Tom, I think we solved it. You know, I'll eat my words that there are no solutions. We found the solution. We figured it out.
Yeah.
Just
It's
bend
community.
bend over for reality, folks.
No, it's
Just
cling
accept
to the
it.
truth as your
Yes.
refuge.
Yes,
Cling
the truth
to
is
the
your-
truth
that
as
is-
your refuge.
That is the much better way of phrasing. My personal refuge has been a continual practice of presence and mindfulness, because I have 3 young kids and a wife who I love, and lots of family who I love, and friends who I love, and the communities that I'm part of that I love and that I appreciate. And every moment that I spend with some other person who I love could be, and I don't think about this in a weird kind of like thirsting for the apocalypse way at all. Like I promise this is not weird, but I often will find myself thinking, what if, what if California broke off of the coast and fell into the sea right now? What if, what if, I don't know, what if Russia sent a nuke 10 minutes ago and I didn't hear about it and it just blows up in LA? Like, what if, right? What if this is the last moment I have alive? Where do I want to be? What do I want to be doing? I want, as often as possible, the answer to be, I want to be right here doing what I'm doing right now. And that this moment is worth it, independent of anything that happens after it. Like, it doesn't matter like from this moment forward, it does not matter. None of the future matters to what is happening right now. I cannot control the future. The future is going to be what it's going to be. Things are going to happen. They're going to happen the way that they happen. I cannot control any of it. I can only control how I show up for this moment with this person that I'm with. And that has to be precious to me for its own sake. And I hope I get many, many more. I hope I get an infinity, frankly. I never want to die, but I probably will. And everyone I love will probably die too.
Probably so.
And so that cannot impact, that cannot detract, that cannot take away from the beauty and the holiness, frankly, of what is right in front of me.
Yes, which means that you, like me, subscribe to the honey doctrine.
I don't know enough about the honey doctrine, but I'll take your word for it because that sounds pretty. I like honey.
Everything is sweetness to everything else. And it's not even about being gullible or credulous. It's really this idea that there is like a kind of a mutual nourishment that we provide one to the other, from apparently greater than to apparently lesser than. And I do believe that, even though day to day things look hard or look great or whatever. And what you said about mindfulness and presence, the end, the last word on living the fulfilled life. So you can cut everything I just said.
I won't do that.
Yeah. Well, are we going to our first?
We are. We are heading to our very first open epilogue, where we invite all the people who can join us behind the paywall. And
very first means there's going to be more of them.
There's going to be more of them. Yeah. So if you're missing this one, if you're hearing this episode and you're like, oh man, well, next time.
Come to the one with Mal in it.
Yeah. Lucky you.
Okay.
All right.